and perform in several different places. So with Climate Change Theater Action, I've performed on the lawn outside of Parks Library, under the awning of Parks Library while it was pouring down rain, and as well as on Fisher Stage and a couple other areas. So yeah, I'll turn it over to the next person.
Hello, my name is Roger Rivera. I'm a senior in advertising with minors in performing arts and English. That's how I found out about CCTA, was through my performing arts minor. And I think it was just an eye-opening experience to work with Vivian and Taylor and all the amazing cast members and Zoe, and just being around all these different individuals showing how much they truly care about both the environment and about theater was an awesome experience to just get to open my world in, I guess. And I wouldn't second guess doing it again. It was an amazing experience.
Hi, I'm Beth. I am a senior in performing arts and I have a minor in animal ecology. Where I was part of the performers in CCTA on 2019, and I also was a perspective writer and the community outreach. And in addition, I was also a musician for this lovely production that took place. One of my biggest takeaways was in the sustainability um, fair, learning about different ways to compost and just learning that we can compost at home by using earthworms. And we don't have to waste so much trash like our coffee grounds or the peels of different fruits. And that was very interesting to learn the impact that those little details have. And it was just very educational process, and it was a very lovely journey with very lovely people. And still 2 years from there, we're still here talking about that experience. So it definitely was something very beneficial to the community and to us.
Hello, my name is Zoe. I graduated in spring 2020 with a BA in art and design and a minor in performing arts. I was the stage manager for CCTA in 2019. So I worked directly with like the director, the actors, the production team, designers, everything like that. So I really got to see all sides of the production and have my hand in kind of everything, which was an amazing experience. And I think one of my favorite parts, because I got to work with a lot of the professors and people who are on faculty at ISU who always do like the designs and the costumes and the sets and things like that, and see how they adapted to this challenge and how our project could push them to be more innovative and think differently and create differently.
Hi, everybody. My name is Taylor Schlinar. I'm in my second year of the MFA in Creative Writing and Environment here at Iowa State. And I actually, so I was the dramaturg for the 2019 production of Climate Change Theater Action at ISU. And prior to that, I was at the University of Missouri-Columbia and produced their 2017 version of this, which looked very different to anything that Iowa State has done. As the dramaturg for 2019, a dramaturg does lots of different things, and that role sort of like changes a little bit with every production. But largely, you know, they're an advocate for the play, they're an advocate for the text, and in production, they're really thinking about how the audience is experiencing this. So I was thinking about the sorts of things like what context does an audience need going in to this production, and a lot of what I did appeared like in the lobby as dramaturgy displays, so that audience coming into the space would feel welcomed and could also read about climate change, about its effects on Iowa and on our community, and find resources on small things that they can do to help. And so that was a large part of my work. And I also helped do things like put together climate platforms from the politicians that were all running, and this was before the field narrowed. So I was reaching out to a lot of politicians and candidates, and I helped run talkbacks after each of the shows as well to sort of engage the audience and get them to talk to each other. So lots of different things that a dramaturg does, and we may circle back to some of these actions later as Vivian talks more.
All right, thanks y'all. And since we are streaming live on YouTube now, I'm just going to reiterate a couple of the pieces of information about what CCTA is for anyone just joining us or watching later. So I'll just repeat that we're talking about climate change theater action here, which Iowa State University has produced 2 years in 2017 and 2019, and will again in 2021, with the theme of a global Green New Deal and how we can work on a global and local scale to address climate change in our communities. So we just had introductions from all of our panelists who have all participated in climate change theater action before, and I'm just going to show a few pictures to give y'all a little bit more of an overview or to help you visualize some of the things that the panelists just introduced and talked about, the different elements of climate change theater action in the 2 years that we've done it previously. And then we'll open it up for questions, comments, conversation, and you can feel free to ask any questions you want, and we can just chat about this and how people can get involved in 2021. So, as I mentioned before, Climate Change Theater Action happens every 2 years in support of the United Nations Climate Change Conference. And it is basically a platform where anyone from around the world can get access to 50 plays commissioned by international playwrights addressing climate change, based on the theme for the year and based on their perspective from wherever they're coming from in the world. And then once participants like Iowa State University get access to these plays, then we commit to producing at least one of those plays in some way. And it can be very small, it could be a living room reading, a couple of plays outdoors, or it can be a full-scale production, which is what Iowa State has done in 2017 and 2019. So and those plays are paired with actions of some sort to get local involvement in climate change. So these first few images are from our production in 2017, which was a smaller independent production of the Eco Theater Lab, which is a collective in the Ames area right now that produces readings, theater actions, plays, performances, and workshops that engage audiences in conversations about environmental and social justice. So we had a call for actors and crew from all disciplines, as well as alumni and community members to participate in the project. We rehearsed outside on the campus grounds, as you'll see here. And we also partnered with several other university and community organizations to produce the event. And our major action was with these organizations to develop a sustainability resource fair. Yes, this was a play about frogs, if you couldn't tell. And Lena said it right there. And yes, so our major action, which some of the panelists already mentioned, was something that we called the Sustainability Resource Fair. And in 2017, this is what it looked like. And it was basically over a dozen organizations, programs on campus in the Ames community who are focused on sustainability initiatives and are already doing this work in our community. And basically, we invited anyone who wanted to join us, representatives from those organizations, to come basically table at our event and talk to audience members before, during intermission, which we extended intermission to really give time for people to chat with these representatives and figure out how they can get involved. And then after the event as well. And this is an action that we continued in 2019. Also. So we'll move to our 2019 production to give you an idea what that looked like. You'll see part of it was indoors, which was indoors in the University Theater, which was new for Climate Change Theater Action in 2019. In 2019, we primarily had ISU Theater producing the event, which meant we again put out a call for student artists from all disciplines, but we also expanded our production team significantly, which just increased our potential for collaboration. And our team include ISU Theater staff and publicity coordinators, incredible designers and a technical director, and you'll see their work in some of these images as well. Beautiful costume and set and lighting design and prop design. And a wonderful stage manager who's here with us today, Zoe, an assistant director and assistant community outreach coordinator, which was Beth. Here's a picture of Roger. His eyes just got really big when he saw that. I'm just gonna flip through some of these. So you can see some of the set, and the set was made, Rob Sunderman designed the set with primarily recycled materials, because we tried to use as many green theater techniques as we could. And then we again partnered with several university and local organizations and with sustainability resource fair representatives. So this is in the local library, Ames Public Library. So we expanded our actions in 2019 to not only include the sustainability resource fair, but to also develop a youth matinee study guide focused on youth climate activists around the world. We did touring performances outside of the theater. So again, in the local library as well as outdoors. Just gonna go through a few of these photos so you can kind of see the different kinds of shows that we selected from the commission pieces. And then we also had a call for original performance and visual artwork. And Beth can talk a little bit more about that since she actually worked on an original piece that was included with all of the commissioned pieces. And Piper's here today, I think, if she wants to talk at all.
Okay, so going with what my lovely Vivian said about writing for CCTA, to be completely honest, I didn't even think. I wrote it just to put my work out there, and it was like, originally it was a poem, and then Vivian gave me the opportunity of turning it into a musical piece, and I was like, oh, we can do that. Okay. And it was a lot of trial and error, but it was very exciting process. And we even got to perform some of it in this rally, which was the strike at Ames City Hall. Am I correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So Vivian, I'll hand it to you.
Yeah, so as you see in a few of these last photos, like Beth was talking about, then some of our actions were also making appearances at other community and climate events, like the climate strike. And Beth and several other students submitted original work, like she said, and then we were able to incorporate original music from the people on our team and really make the project entirely built from the team members that we had, the skill sets and talents and interests of the people on our team. And that's what we hope to do in 2021 too, is really make this about what are the assets and that we have in our community and on our team, and how can we build the project from there so that it feels community-based, which I think is the point of climate change theater action as a whole.
And it is like very important because it helps students like us that are wanting to be like our interest in writing and other assets of like the arts industry to have like personal growth and professional growth, and just the experience of exposing your work and then having people afterwards commenting about it and commenting about the pieces, and discovering that some pieces were written by some like professional writers, but some pieces were written by members of the community. They engage more, and it's very exciting to see the audience just reach out to those individuals and be like, oh my God, you wrote this is amazing, and then commenting about it, and just creating that sense of engagement and comfortability within the community.
Yeah, and if any of the other panelists want to talk a little bit about that community engagement aspect of it too, I think that's something that the creators or the developers of climate change theater action, that was a focus of theirs, or I think a priority in developing a project like this, is how can we use theater as a way to really engage the community in conversations that are relevant to all of our lives, and how can theater and storytelling help make a platform, I guess, for those kinds of conversations. And as Beth mentioned, that it's not only having artwork and stories and songs and poems from our local community join in this international conversation, but the actors and production team members also engaged with the Sustainability Resource Fair representatives, as well as audience members at basically every performance during intermission, talking with them. When Taylor led the talk back, then actors went out into the audience and production team members went out in the audience to help lead small group discussions. So if any of the other panelists want to chime in on that. And then, like I said, I think there are several people here who I'm very excited to see are on the Zoom call with us who also participated. And if you want to talk about your experiences, feel free as well.
I think,
Go for it.
I was just going to say that I think another big thing, at least for the casting choices, we were able to work with alumni and high schoolers to create that sense of community throughout the process. And through this process, we had a matinee show where a bunch of high schoolers came in to come see the show. And it was interesting to have those conversations with the high schoolers, as they differed so much from the conversations we were having with, say, the older adults that came to come see the show at the library or something like that. Having those conversations with different styles of and different walks of life was that opportunity to spread this awareness on what we were trying to promote through the show, from like from like a very young age to an older demographic as well.
Definitely. And I was just going to add that I think it was really exciting, and I loved being part of the outdoor performances because we got to interact with a lot of audiences that maybe wouldn't choose to come see a theater production, maybe ever, but maybe especially at their university. And because we were outside just in the common area, doing short plays where people could walk out of the library and try to understand what was happening and stay for 5 or 10 minutes and see a couple stories and engage with it, and then decide whether they want to stay or move along. We had a lot of groups that would just sort of come and stand behind the chairs or like on the other side of the chairs and just watch for a little bit to sort of, I don't know, just be there, be present. And there were several audience members that did wind up just walking over, and then they stayed for the whole rest of the show, and then they talked to us afterwards, and we got to engage with them during the performance. And that was one of the really fascinating and interesting parts of community engagement for this production in particular, especially with the short stories. And I know Perform the Protest also had a similar experience this past year with that type of theater. And I think, yeah, that was a really exciting form of community engagement as well.
Awesome. I'm giving it a beat in case anyone wants to jump in. I don't want to jump on anyone's toes. No, that's wonderful. And I think, yeah, I would echo that also, I guess, in 2021, for everybody on our call or anyone watching on YouTube, that for our 2021 production, we hope to offer similar opportunities for kind of intergenerational conversations, like Roger mentioned, and also for these community engagement opportunities. Of course, the way that theater is being done right now looks a little bit different, but I think because of the nature of climate change theater action and the intent of the artistic directors to make it a really flexible process, then there's a lot of ways we could go about it in 2021. And again, that will kind of depend on who's interested in joining our team and what they want to get out of the process and what the audience wants to get out of the process and what's going on in our community right now. And so our format for 2021 might be partially virtual. It might be these outdoor performances. It's something that makes sure that we can engage the community in these conversations in a way that's hopefully safe and accessible and kind of pulls in as many perspectives as we can on this topic and also what's happening in our own community. So something I haven't mentioned yet, but y'all might have heard of in Ames is that in 1 week from today, then at the city council meeting in Ames, then there will be a presentation or a discussion about who will be the consultants for Ames climate action planning process, which is just beginning this year. And a lot of people have been really looking forward to this process happening in Ames, and I think all over the world, these local climate action plans that try to work towards resiliency and community efforts towards climate sustainability and climate justice. And so that's starting to happen in Ames, and we'll probably try to do whatever we can with climate change theater action to support that process and try to pull community members into that process through maybe a different way than is normally done through the arts, which I think is something that everyone on this call and everyone who's watching at least has some interest in, right, is how the arts can help start conversations in that way. So if I do want to reiterate, I think Carissa put it in the chat as well, but if you have questions or thoughts to share or anything like that, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and the panelists can chat about any of those topics that you want. And I have plenty of questions that I can ask the panelists and that they can ask each other too, to keep talking about climate change theater action and our experiences and what we can look forward to in the next iteration of what this looks like at Iowa State. I just wanted to get that call again for anybody who wants, and you can unmute and talk to if you're on this call. That'll work great. So I wonder if one of the things that we talked about briefly in each of your introductions is kind of how there's a lot of really small plays that we worked with. And at Iowa State, both years, then we had a collection of, I don't know, a dozen or more of these 5-minute plays. So it was a lot of different styles and a lot of different perspectives that were brought into the story, even though it was kind of a full-length production. So if any of the panelists want to talk about that experience as performers, or as I know Taylor looked at kind of gathered information on the background of some of the plays and the playwrights and that sort of thing. And Zoe, of course, had to stage manage a lot of different plays with a lot of different needs and styles and organizing that with the designers and all of that. So if y'all have any thoughts on that, that might be interesting for the audience here to hear about.
One thing that I think is worth mentioning in that vein is just the fact that, you know, when you're thinking about who the audience is, the audience in Iowa is going to look very different than the audience in maybe New York or even, you know, in any other country. And so one of the things that I really appreciate about what the artistic directors of CCTA have done is given a really diverse set of plays with lots of options. And that was something that we were thinking about as we were reading through scripts and trying to make decisions on what we were bringing in, was thinking about, you know, what is appropriate for this community in Iowa today, and also thinking about just the diversity of perspectives we have in this community in particular. And but it's interesting to read sort of some of those others that you know, there's scripts that take very different perspectives on climate change, and I think we were trying to be cognizant of scripts that would be inviting to both, you know, some of the more academic folks that we have in Ames as a university town, as well as maybe people who have, you know, larger questions about climate change, if that makes sense. And so that was a interesting kind of conversation to navigate as we were thinking about how to curate this set of plays. And something that I think is a real advantage of having lots of small plays is that we can bring in different strategies, and each play has a different entry point into climate change.
I think in that same aspect, sorry, I turned off the camera instead of the sound. In that same aspect, I think in relation to Benjamin's question of like what's the most beneficial aspect of being a part of the climate change action, I do think it's that the fact that we had such short shows allowed for accessibility to anyone, whether they were just, we, like Lena mentioned earlier, we performed outside in front of Parks Library. And if somebody only had a moment to watch, say, a scene, they were able to watch that scene. And maybe if they saw it on a different day, they were able to maybe see a different scene. And throughout these scenes were very different. Like I was at one point pretending to be, most of us were pretending to be bees. Um, but then there's other scenes where I'm literally on the ground gasping for air, like the photo showed, and it does definitely has these different stylistic choices to hopefully reach every different audience along the way.
I think in addition to that, one of the things that been most beneficial aspect of being part of climate change theater action is the fact that you can put in practice the multidisciplinary damn, I forgot my words. The multidisciplinary okay, just the multidisciplinary fields of the arts and like the different ways you can engage with it. And it's just very important that us as students, and Vivian did such a lovely job at this. It was not only directing us, it was more of giving us some tools and allowing us to make choices. And it was not telling us what to do, but help us to discover our potential with guidance and not just imperative decision making. Oh, I cannot speak today. I apologize for that.
That is one aspect that I'm glad you brought that up, Beth, though, because that's one aspect that I think we wanted to talk a little bit about today is the multidisciplinary nature of climate change theater action, just because it is theater, but then also that we're talking about science and we're talking about kind of social and environmental issues and how they cross over and all of those kind of connection points. So I mean, Beth, you probably have an especially interesting perspective on that because you are actually studying two different fields that are emerging. And then you're probably always having on your mind kind of the artistic side of things, but then also thinking from a scientific perspective. And we had a lot of people on our team who brought all of those different disciplinary perspectives, as well as perspectives from all other aspects of their life, right, into the storytelling, which I think really benefited the process. So I'm really glad you brought that up. And then, yes, for anyone who didn't see, thank you, Benjamin, for your question, which for any of the panelists who didn't see, it's as an artist, what's been the most beneficial aspect of being a part of climate change theater action? So if anyone else wants to speak to that, feel free. And you can take a second to think too.
I can answer. Yeah, going off of some of what Roger and Beth have already talked about, I think like y'all were discussing before, working with all the different styles and mindsets and, like Taylor said, entry points into the plays and the discussion about climate change was definitely a huge challenge artistically, which also made it really exciting. And I think as an ensemble of actors, that was also a really fun challenge too, because we would be going from a play where we were all creating a soundscape of a pond together and had to be listening so intently and closely to what everyone else was doing to create an immersive experience for the audience. And we were so in tune with each other and trying to connect and breathe and operate as one sort of living theater organism or whatever. And then you might immediately have to go into a two-person scene with someone else that was a completely different style and stakes. So that sort of flexibility and range that I think a lot of us developed and improved on throughout the process of that performance was definitely hugely beneficial as an artist and has really enhanced my skills as well as I think everyone else involved.
Oh yeah, Beth, do you have something else? Okay, if you do,
question.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we have another question in the chat. How do you bring in or appeal to people who might be outside of Ames? And will the plays be recorded for viewing as an aftermath of COVID? And I'll just speak briefly to this, but then anyone else who wants to jump in, please do. So I think this is a question that I had because I was curious about what the panelists thought about kind of what this international as well as local aspect of this project and how we were producing something very, like Taylor mentioned, very specific to the Ames community and the ISU community and the community that was built here, right? But we were also performing plays that were clearly written by people from other places and across the world from us. And at the same time, because all of these plays are actually performed in the same 4-month period. So we have this year, we have, from September to December, anyone from around the world can do climate change theater action, right? Which meant that while we were doing our performances, so were tons of people all around the world. And the artistic directors and the team, kind of the greater producing team of climate change theater action did a really wonderful job of letting everybody who's participating get a sneak peek into what our fellow community members of kind of the global community were doing at the same time, which was kind of cool. So on social media and on their website and all of that had images and snippets and quotes and everything like that from people who are doing this at the same time as us and doing it in very, very different ways because they were catering their project to their community and the team members that they had on the project that of course looked completely different from ours. And so that was something for me, at least, that was an appeal as a person in Ames, looking at the rest of our community outside who's trying to address climate action, but also a way that I think the producing partners tried to bring in, tried to make sure that our production in Ames was accessible to people outside of Ames or to bring people in. And Mackenzie, for 2021, we're figuring out what that's going to look like. And there's a lot of different opportunities. And I think figuring out ways for it to be recorded for viewing by a lot of people in a lot of different places and at different times is definitely going to be a part of that, especially because I think we've all observed that not just for COVID reasons, but for all kinds of accessibility reasons, making theater more accessible in this way can be really important. But then, does anybody else have anything to add to that?
Okay, so for the first part of the question, how do you bring in or appeal to people who might be outside of Ames? I think it is important to also acknowledge the fact that CCTA brings to the table stories that do relate to people in Ames, but also relate to other peoples and other communities. And that's how we, majority of the time, engage people that are either outside of Ames or that are not from Iowa, but maybe are studying here, like they're not born and raised in Iowa. And that is how, by trying to touch base on a lot of different stories and making the audience feel empathetic and sympathetic towards the storytelling or towards the message of the story, that is how we try to engage and appeal to people as much as possible.
Rivera, totally jump in.
So what I think of in this question is that, so we performed this in the fall of 2019, but I think it was about February of 2020, there was this huge climate strike in Des Moines where a small group of us, we took some of those pieces and brought them to the climate strike. And even me and Sam Rude, we made puppets to bring to it as well. I think also that's a very good example of how like this project always lives on, and it continues at least until we have a sustainable world.
Thank you, Piper. Yes, Lisa said an extension of the action. Yeah, I forgot that that was so many months after we finished climate change theater action, because in 2019 we did it in October. Yeah, and then we reconvened in February. So that was a lot of fun. We do have another question from Samuel Hune. What was one piece that stuck out to you, be it the message or the way it was performed? And Sam actually worked on the project too, so if you want to jump in, you can.
I'll mention that one of the questions that we asked during the talk back at each performance was similar to this, asking people to think about, sort of a moment that stuck with them. And for whatever reason, a couple of the ones that came up very frequently were there was a piece about bees in which everyone, as somebody mentioned, everyone was acting as bees, and they became this sort of cluster. And I think there may have been an image of it we saw in the slideshow, and slowly those actors trailed away until there was just one bee remaining. And I think that was a moment that stuck with a lot of audience members for whatever reason. I think maybe having to do with that sense of isolation or something, or the bringing that human element to the non-human experience of the bee, maybe, I don't know. And a similar one, I think, was the Pond Life was the name of the one that was described, of sort of doing this whole soundscape that was just so immersive, where actors were in and among and around the audience and building the sounds of this pond, while these two actors on stage were being frogs, dealing with the reality of their pond's pollution and the very physical effects of that on them and their children and their bodies. So I think that both of those seem to really, for whatever reason, stick with many of the audience members that talked about them in the talkbacks. There were others as well.
I think something cool about those pieces were also both in the scripts, they were just the bee piece was just a monologue. It was a very long monologue, and the Pond Life piece was just the two characters, but we were able to integrate all of our team and all of our actors into them to create something much larger than it was on the page. And the bee piece was also the very first piece of the show to really kick it off and see. It was very movement based, but also team based, and it was very cool.
Jonathan, jump in.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know me, I'm Jonathan ONeill. I was a part of this, the 2019 production of Climate Change Theater Action. And one of the plays, or two of them, that really stuck out to me because it related a lot to where I'm from. I'm from Puerto Rico. Were Categories and Luz, because of the topic of the hurricanes that were happening and how the environment has been changing, and there's more hurricanes happening because of it. And I really enjoy this play because it sort of put me in that space of what people were going through back home when Hurricane Maria was happening in 2017, because I was already here in college. So I didn't experience that firsthand in person. And then also how physically demanding it was for my castmates as well, because they were embodying the eye. I was the eye of the hurricane, but they were the sounds, the movements, the wind, and all that sort of stuff. And it was really engaging, really demanding. And then from there, we switched up into a two-person scene or play, which was done by Beth and myself, named Luz, which was a more personal and more direct connection between us in the audience as to what sort of categories has done and how has impacted not having impeding people from having power and electricity for months and months and months, which happened back home in Puerto Rico. I think those two plays specifically resonated a lot. And then seeing friends of mine that were Puerto Rican or people after the show in the talk back or in the intermission talk about how powerful those stories were, and getting to share those experiences with them was really empowering.
Thanks so much, Jonathan, for sharing. It's so wonderful to see so many people here who worked on it. And does anyone else have anything to add to that question? And then I think we have, yeah, go ahead, Piper.
For me, it's a bit of a toss-up because there was the Rube Goldberg thing, which relates a lot to what we've been learning in citizen artistry about audience engagement. Like, it's not the same level as like Theater of the Oppressed would be, but it's probably like the least commitment you would need to get from your audience, because it just tells them exactly what to do. And it was always really cool when everybody joined hands at the end and were all swaying and dancing. But also the Homo sapiens, of course, where Beth and I were a species that evolved from the Homo sapiens, and the audience were Homo sapiens in a zoo. And there's one moment where I had to feed chocolate to somebody in the audience. And when we did our show at Ames Public Library, somebody had their kid sitting on their lap, and I got to give this little kid a piece of chocolate, and he was so grateful. But also it was just like very fun interacting with the audience there. And some people were probably caught off guard, a little bit like anxious about what was going to happen. But I think most people had so much fun with it. That's where that picture came from, of me sitting with those people doing the thumbs up. But that piece was just a lot of fun, I think. And it shows a sort of dark future, but it keeps it light enough to where we can remain hopeful about where we will go in the future.
I think another thing that I would add to what Piper was saying was that I really appreciated too was how our production was structured. Like Rube Goldberg was the play that we did prior to intermission. So getting the audiences engaged and getting those audiences comfortable in the space and with the topics that we're discussing prior to intermission, when we were go to the lobby and have those sustainability research fairs happening and engaging with different organizations in the community as well as cast members. I think that was really cool. And then finishing up with an ensemble piece to bring everything full circle. I think that was really good too.
Okay, I know we're in a crunch of time, but my favorite piece was was it here? Which one was the one of heavy percussion based?
This.
Thank you. This is a piece. It's a very heavy piece that gets you thinking, and we added the element of percussion. And I just remember the lights going red. It was such a beautiful and impactful, like kind of aggressive, but not slightly aggressive with the words and just like the environment. And it just really, really got me thinking about the future and about like how we as humans have done so much damage to the earth and how we need to compensate for it, and that we're running out of time. So yeah.
I think that piece also hit for me the most, beyond the fact that I couldn't memorize it to save my life. But once I did, it was a very impactful piece, like Beth mentioned. And along with that, we were no longer on the stage. We were actually standing in front of it. So it was that more personal setting. And it was more of like, oh, we're on your level. We're not trying to speak down to anybody. We're trying to speak as a conversation in a way of like, this is like our chance to fix the wrong that's happened in the past. And it's our opportunity to hopefully move forward in a positive light rather than trying to sit there and tell people what they're doing is wrong because we're not any better. Maybe some people might take different methods in helping the planet, but in the end, we all have our flaws. And I think that was the big notion there.
I think the conversation with the public also was like a conversation that like you were the medium, like the actors were the medium between the conversation with the audience and the conversation with the music. Like I also felt when as a percussionist that it was just very, the music, I was reacting to what you guys were saying. I was talking back to what you guys were expressing. And I thought it was just very like, that piece always got the best of me in the best, powerful, and enlightening way.
We are about at time, but since we started taping late, then I think we can, if we have another question, feel free to ask. Panelists, if you have to run them, that's okay too. But we just want to give one last opportunity to ask any questions. But then, of course, you can talk to any of us at any time about climate change theater action. You can definitely reach out to Crease or Taylor or me for ways that you can get involved. Let us know if you're interested in getting involved in 2021. And we're very excited to be able to share this with y'all today. And Zoe, if you want to say any, you don't have to, but if you want to say anything else about kind of what it was like to stage manage a touring production, you mentioned it in your intro, but with all of these different pieces that everyone just shared about, like all these fun pieces, but then that's a lot for a stage manager to handle, but also kind of cool to see it from the outside, which I was looking on with you. But if you want to say anything about that, I want to make sure to give space.
I mean, stage managing the touring portion was a lot of work, but it was after we had our main stage show at Fisher. So I think a lot of the actors and production team and crew were all very helpful in that they already knew kind of what expectations were and everything that was set. So then, and I could be an intermediary toward the people that were coordinating at the library, at both libraries, at Parks Library and at the Ames Public Library. And in that sense, I got to do a lot more community outreach and community coordination with those teams and those people. But touring, outside touring was quite the time.
I believe we mentioned the rain earlier, which was fun, but we always knew it could happen, and it always does sometimes when you do outdoor theater, which is a blast. Yes, and people are echoing in the comments, but I'll say out loud for anyone listening later that Zoe was amazing as a stage manager. So wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. Again, reach out to us at any time if you have more questions. I think the panelists and I will have to run, but we really appreciate all of you being here. As Beth and Roger also put in the chat, a huge thank you to everyone who worked on CCTA in 2017 and 2019, for all of you here who shared your experiences talking about it, and for everyone listening for engaging with us and talking about the show and talking about opportunities to get involved in 2021. And we are very much looking forward to it.